right, so I'm recording on the computer and
Do you know how to get the audio so it's like
separate.
mhm.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that when it saves in Zoom, like you have the audio video file and then it also saves an audio file separately.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
so we should be fine. Okay. So so let's start. All right, welcome back to Cracks in Postmodernity. Today we have Joseph Schafer, who I discovered on Instagram. Joseph, tell us about yourself.
Hello, I'm Joseph Schafer. I'm a political alchemist and theorist from the Midwest, from Omaha, Nebraska. Um, I run an Instagram account called Zizek on a Wired Brain, and I'm a I'm a writer, poet. I do all kinds of stuff. I'm very busy.
So I first found Joseph when I was scrolling through Instagram and found a very provocative post about the American university experience, which we mentioned in the first episode. So Joseph, tell us what has been university been like for you and like how have you been analyzing that experience?
Well, university, I don't want to like overstate because the positive is the university experience has been overwhelmingly positive. However, there's certain cultural trends that I noticed that are very concerning. I think coming out of, COVID or whatever, there has been an intense lead into hedonism. I think people are really leaning into this sort of these hollow social avenues. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing now. We're seeing a lot of excess of all characters, of, uh, you know, drinking, all of the usual college vices are expanded tenfold. And I think it's because we live in uniquely hollow times.
And you said in that particular post that like specifically with drinking, like people will drink to the point of getting fucked up because like we're already fucked over because we already have a sense
Yes.
that like everything's empty, you know.
Yeah. The point of that post is that nobody says that they want to drink. They always say, "I'm going to get fucked up," and that actually proves that it was never about the drinking. It's about proving to themselves that they're fucked up, which they already are. So it's just a confirmation of their damaged psyche, their damaged persona that takes place through consumption. And you can see this in consumption of all characters, but that's how it's most prevalent.
And so I should also mention, so your Instagram, Zizek on a wired brain. So like let's go into Zizek a little bit, who is a fascinating character to say the least. So like how did you first discover him? Like how has he shaped the way you look at what's going on today and all of that?
Well, I think I have a kind of an unorthodox experience with Zizek because I didn't start with reading Zizek. I had actually read Hegel and I had like a passing familiarity with Lacan. I got into Lacan more after reading Zizek, but I had already read Hegel, Freud, Marx. And so the idea that there was someone out here kind of synthesizing these concepts in such a radical way was really exciting for me. And that's how I really got into Zizek.
So Zizek is obviously writing in like okay, European context, but like how do you find that his writings help to shed light on what's going on in American culture now?
Well, I think it's kind of almost sweet how Zizek doesn't understand the American problem. I think that you can use some of Zizek's analysis to kind of come at America, but America's a unique beast. And I think Zizekian tools are good to have in the arsenal. For instance, like he has this concept of, over agreement, over identification ideologically, and I think that's a powerful tool that Americans can use. But to take his political analysis, like I really think it is rooted in Europe. in some sense. At least my reading of Zizek comes across as uniquely European, because America is, I don't know, we've got a lot of shit that's going on here. It's a little bit different. We see in America an acceleration of all these European trends. They kind of hit a fever pitch here. So in order to, I guess, fully apply Zizekian thought to America, you actually have to take his own concept of hyper agreement and hyper agree with Zizek himself.
Yeah, and one of the things that we were talking about, like America's particular struggles right now, like a lot of it has to do with hysteria over COVID, vaccine stuff. And you were saying, like, I don't know, some of the things about your university and their requirements. Can you like talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I go to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and we have we're not one of the vaccine mandated universities. I know a fair number of them are, maybe a majority of them are, but we are not one of those states. Um, so what they do is they have vaccines available on the school campus, basically at any time. So you can always get vaxxed. But if you don't have your vaccination records, then what they do, or you haven't gotten it. If you can't prove to them that you've been vaccinated, then you have to do a weekly spit test. And before you enter every building, you have to show an app. The app basically has a green check mark that says access granted. Now, the problem with this app is that it's like you can open up the App Store and look up the Safer Communities app right now, and it will have 1 star because it is terribly glitchy. And this is what dictates whether I get to go to class, whether I get to go into a dining hall. Basically, like all the functions of university, getting to eat and getting to learn are dictated by this app. So and it defaults to an access denied. So the screen has to load to the green check mark of approval. So if it won't load because you're using the university's Wi-Fi, which doesn't work really well, or you're in a building where you can't really get good coverage, you simply won't enter the building. So but you also kind of sense a breakdown in the ability of the Safer Communities, the app checkers, to enforce this, because these are, college students just trying to get some stuff knocked off of their tuition. If you walk right past them, they're not going to forcibly apprehend you. They simply won't do it. So there's a limit to the power that this, app has over your life, but that's actually just dictated over how you're willing to exert your force against them.
And so, like, the fact that in order to get access to the classroom, like, you have to show this green check mark, and that's all contingent upon whether this glitchy app is going to work. Like, that's highly symbolic. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you order. Like, what does this mean? Like, what does it mean to you?
I think that it is. I think that the sign of the green check mark is really potent in a way that I can't identify, because I think that, well, I study, I'm in an ancient Greece class right now, and I'm learning a lot about, what it takes to be a citizen in ancient Greece. And I think that this has like the same components of citizenship, right? Because if you're a citizen, which means that you're like a landowner and you follow all the proper rules for, being, and now it's the opposite. Now a citizen can't own anything, but I'll save that.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish this thought. You get your grain, you get access to your courts, you get, your children can, go to university, maybe even transcend their class, although that's pretty rare. And it wasn't called university, but they had similar systems. And I think that now it's simply another signifier of citizenship, and that to lose access to, this check mark, this symbol of citizenship, is to lose, all the rights and freedoms associated with that you're paying the university for, basically.
Mhm. Yeah, because like I'm so yeah, I ultimately decided to get vaccinated because of the circumstances of where I work is like the most reasonable decision for me. But what I don't understand is the fact that we create these moralistic polemics where you have the good side and the bad side. It's like, where is like, why do we have to demonize people who may make a different decision that, yeah, maybe we might not agree with, but like, why do we not give people the benefit of the doubt that they may have adequate reasons that, again, we may not understand? Like, why is my decision now the absolute truth, and that anyone else who doesn't agree, like, we go into hysterics? Um,
And
yeah.
I was on a bike ride the other day, and I was going past the state capitol, and there was some sort of an anti-vaccine protest of some sort there. And so I went around, just talking to people because I have that natural journalistic proclivity or whatever. And I heard a story, and I'm going to be covering the story for Splice today.
Mhm.
Um, and the story was that there's a woman who's in stage 5 renal failure,
Mhm.
and she needs what is renal? That's kidney
Kidney.
or
That's
kidney?
kidney.
Okay, yeah, she needs a kidney transplant, right? And she was at the towards the top of the list to get this transplant, but they called her and told her that because she was not vaccinated, her request for an organ was going to be put on hold.
Mm.
And so now it creates this interesting, kind of a horrifying ethic where if you do not get vaccinated, you're actively confronting the possibility of death. And I think that this is kind of an intense case, but it kind of shows the level of commitment we're dealing with here. And I think that there are and people are concerned about the long-term health effects of the vaccine or whatever. I think they would be less prevalent for me, but someone who is having kidney problems and would be getting this vaccine right before a transplant, I have no idea what it would do to you. And I don't think the people in the scientific community can know for certain either what would happen. But this is speculation. I'm not a medical professional in any way, but I am an ethicist, and it seems highly unethical.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, this is such a clear sign of how the puritanical beginnings of our culture like have not worn away at all. Like, sure, we're secularizing, but you can see there's such a religious fervor behind this like otherizing of people who have a different position, to the point that like, they're damned, we're the saved, and they're like, you know, they're like, I was speaking with a group of people that were really determined that, like, as they said, you can't reason with these people, like they're so out of their minds, and it's like this idea that we're not, like, when you disagree with someone, we're not talking about fellow human beings who, yeah, again, we may not be on the same page, but we can have a conversation. We can consider, like, what's your reasoning, what's your logic. The fact that we don't even share this same human nature now, like, it's super Manichaean, like.
Yeah, and this Puritanism, I will add, shares nothing in common with the ethic of Christianity, that of mercy, forgiveness, and understanding. It doesn't, that's why Puritans were really bad theologians. But I guess, I'm revealing a bit of a Protestant character here. But I really think that like the Christian ethos should be that of mercy. And I don't see any mercy today. And that's why I think the only type of mercy we see um, is probably used as a political cudgel. I
Yeah.
think that's the only dominant mode of mercy is, for instance, being like, oh, I'm going to let people out of prison or whatever, to reveal my true virtue and my understanding of the human condition, when that's not That's not their focus, never has been.
Yeah. It's not a true interest in the well-being of the other. It's more like my performance of, my virtuousness, my ethical,
Yeah,
But
it all comes back to performance. People forget that they're not acting.
yeah, but like what I wonder though is if yeah, we're becoming more secular, and like at least on the surface, why is it that this fervor, this real belief that some of us are saved and others are condemned, like why is this so strong? Like why has it not worn off? That I can't wrap my mind around.
I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah, it is mysterious,
Yeah.
but hmm. But I think like so with the performance thing, one of the things that like I think about a lot is the kind of camp aesthetic. Like it's something that I talk about on here a lot. That, camp's whole ethos is that of critiquing the emptiness, the hollowness of culture and society by being intentionally hollow. So it's like you turn everything into a performance for the sake of pointing out that like all these people who claim to be so moral, so upright, like are really just performing. And I think it's a very effective critique because instead of just pointing the finger and being like, oh, you're so empty, this is like so meaningless and vapid, you you use the approach of the person you're critiquing to kind of like flip it on its head and be like, this is what you're doing. Do you see now how empty it is? You know?
It's Zizeki hyper agreement. It's to take something and to, you know, make it agree with it more than the ideology itself allows for. You see something that you're opposed to, and when you see something that you're opposed to, you say this. You agree with it in some way, in a way that's more than the initial statement. I think it's that for aesthetics, although I'm not really well read on aesthetics. So.
Yeah. And I think that is the whole point though of camp is that you're playing up the aesthetics. You're creating this like super decadent aesthetic that again, like morally is hollow, but at least you're not claiming that it's something that it's not. Like that it's hollow, but at least you acknowledge the truth of it. Whereas so much of these performances of moral virtuousness really lack any substance, but purport to be something greater.
Yeah, and now we have not only the decadence of, actual decadence, like richness.
Yeah.
You have the decadence of images, signs, performance, and that's really where America cuts itself out from Europe. Is people say that we're the richest country in the world, and that may be economically true, but we're also the richest in terms of signs of the proliferation of images.
Mm. And I think like that was extremely evident during the Trump era because I mean many people have said this that like Trump is the first camp president. And I don't know, like at first when he said he was running for president, I thought it was a joke. But I had to think back to the days when he was on Apprentice or when he hosted Apprentice because like I don't know, in middle school or starting high school then. And I have to say, like, I was obsessed. Like, I was so fascinated by this guy's persona because it's so larger than life that it's ridiculous. And like, he says these things that are really outlandish, and you know that they're outlandish. And that's what makes him so entertaining. It's like he's this amplified kind of mirror reflection of our culture. And you can't help but be fascinated and stare. But then yeah, so I don't know, once he actually became president, it's like okay, morally a lot of these things that he says are atrocious, but when you look at it from an aesthetic or a performative point of view, it's like wow, he's doing something right now, he's really saying something, he's holding up a mirror to the culture. But what I can't understand is that like the people who actually take what he says seriously and get scandalized, like don't really see that, wait, this is actually us as a culture. Like we are part of the culture that has produced Trump.
Yeah. The far more stark condemnation is that we're also a part of the culture that created Joe Biden. Um,
Yeah.
this is where it gets really really I don't know, fearful. It's fearful times, because the same security theater, the same I guess what their homogeneity, yeah,
Mhm.
the official messages coming out of the White House, the images, the speeches, everything is completely homogenized. And so now we're facing, out of the proliferation of like difference, multicultural, not in the sense of like multiculturalism, but like
Mhm.
a non-unified culture.
Yeah.
Um, we're seeing the rise once again of monoculture, of unitary culture.
Mhm.
And I think it's really, I think it's creating now a dialectical position between the two, that either you have a proliferation or a homogenization. And I think more or less the Democratic Party has become one of homogenization, and the Republican Party has become one of multiplicity of difference, which is ironic given both of their messaging on issues of immigration or whatever. But I think that in terms of images, there's a very strict divide there.
Mhm.
And you see these old, Tea Party Republicans who are still around, who are still kind of pushing, this outdated mode. But that's not the direction the party's headed in, I would argue.
Why do you say that the Republican Party is more of the like diverse multicultural party? Because like I get
Uh,
what you're saying about the monoculture of the left, but why do you say that about Republicans?
because I think that they have within their base many cultural differences,
Mhm.
many class differences. They have an incredibly undisciplined party, and I think out of a lack of centralized discipline, you get these kinds of interesting scenarios where Trump is telling Ted Cruz that his dad killed Kennedy, and you have like Turning Point USA, which is kind of distancing itself now from the Republican Party. Like now they're handing out pins that say, there's three boxes, and one of them says like Democrat, Republican, and neither of those are checked. Then in all caps it says woke, and then they have a check for that.
Yeah.
There's kind of a third positionist character of the Republican Party that's gaining popularity. Some people call it populist, some people call it fascist. I have no interest in giving it a name, but I think that that's where a proliferation of difference will occur. Now, that's not to say that it's actually good or something to be sided with, or that their
Mhm.
policies will be beneficial to the people. That's not my claim at all. I'm simply saying that we will see a proliferation of culture, and we will see like images being produced more and with more variety, were they to take some power. That's
Yeah.
not actually a good reason to support them. So if you're listening to this and you're like going to splice it and be like, oh, this is proof that he's telling me to vote for the Republican Party,
No,
you just be stupid. You're not listening.
no, that's not what's happening. But yeah, no, I mean, with the monoculture, it's very clear that for most mainstream neoliberals, Democrats, that this talk of multiculturalism, diversity, yeah, like it's performative, very surface level, but in reality, it's this push to make all kinds of people kind of fit this very bourgeois, again, neoliberal mold, which, first of all, like, is that even in the best interest? of people, especially minorities, but
No.
also, well, obviously not. But why what I'm trying to understand is like why are so many people so naive as to think that this is like they really do care about minorities, about you know, why
I
is it
think I think it's not. I think very few people are true believers, although they exist.
very
I
loud,
think, yeah,
make a lot of
they are.
noise.
Yes, they do. But I think far more often the situation is such that it seems as though there's no alternative because you have the Democratic Party saying, we have this, bourgeois mode of like multiculturalism, and then the Republican Party is almost like openly antagonistic to your peaceable existence, and have been for some time historically, probably since the Reagan administration. Um, so what then? What's your alternative? If you believe that it's your civic duty to vote and that it's very important that you do.
Mm,
I don't think there's an easy answer there.
no, not really. It's just it's baffling to me that so many people are I mean, I hear you're saying that it's like okay, there are a lot of people who see through it. I think a lot of it depends on like what environment you're in, like what part of the country you're in, because from what I see, at least like being on the East Coast and being involved in certain institutions, like vast majority of people really buy into this. And when you question and say, okay, but like, is this truly their intention? It's like knee-jerk reaction to say, like, how dare you question? Like, how dare you think that they don't have the best interest in mind of the people that they're claiming to advocate for? So like where you are, what do you see? Like, what's the kind of culture that you're seeing?
Well, the kind of culture I see twofold. So first, I was born in the birthplace of Malcolm X,
Okay.
and that he didn't end up living there for very long. His family moved away, but there's a lot of associations in that town dedicated to preserving his legacy and so on. But you can see that that kind of ethnic separation. It's very different from like Baldwin's view. I know on the last podcast you talked about Baldwin, your admiration for Baldwin. And I think the view is different because Baldwin lived in New York, right? I think a lot of this is geographic. Baldwin lived in New York, eventually moved to France. But when Baldwin lived in New York, he kind of got this broad picture of the melting pot. As like flawed as it was, and as antagonistic to him as it was like personally,
Yeah.
there really was no sense of like ethnic separation, ethnic identity. Like you're kind of all jumbled in together, and you lived next door to someone who was a different race of you, most likely. And I think on along racialized lines out here, it's very different because we still have very strong ethnic enclaves. Cities are still divided racially. Segregation. Omaha, Nebraska, is the most segregated city in the United States. So that's kind of I guess a major difference.
Yeah, because I mean, so Baldwin grew up in Harlem, like towards the end of the Harlem Renaissance, when things were like not, conditions were not so great in that neighborhood. But as you said, like because he's in Manhattan, had a lot of interaction with people of other backgrounds. Like I think it was his second grade teacher was like, I think a kind of waspy Anglo woman. And when his father found out that he was going to this teacher for like you know extra help outside of school, the father freaked out and was like, we don't trust white people. And he's like, but my teacher loves me, why are you, and then like he went to high school at a private Jewish high school and pretty secular, but still was very aware of the prejudice and like yeah segregation within the city, but because he had interaction with other people, like really shaped the way he understood like himself, but also American culture. That like there are nuances here. It's not just there's one side or another, you know.
Yeah.
But then I wonder, like, so being in different, the fact that America is so big that there are so many different subcultures within this entire country, different narratives that we ascribe to. Like, is there a possibility of unity, of a shared narrative at this point? Or, like, I don't know. Like, this is what I think about a lot when I see all this division.
So I put it in a like a Lacanian category. I
Mhm.
think that the American common cultural identity can only be established through an other. I think that this is also prevalent in other countries, but I think it's most prevalent in the United States because it's so disjointed and so large and so geographically and culturally and economically diverse. So you saw kind of the rollout of monoculture, American monoculture, and homogenization and unity, things of that nature. After 9/11, during World War II, these were all wars against the other. And I think that there is an attempt to make COVID the same thing. I think it has in some sense worked. That COVID is now the other, and that we are all fighting this disease. But this effort to kind of construct that narrative has been severely harmed by vaccine and mask discourse, because this has created a new proliferation of differences, a new entrenchment of positions, so on down the line. But you saw towards the beginning of the pandemic, before solutions were really offered and everyone was, rather terrified, that there was a sense of we were all in this together, but kind of in a doomed way, like you're on the Titanic, and you're looking around at the people around you. Um, but that is a sense of unity.
Hmm.
But I don't. What is this the next other being doomed? I think it's possible. We're an empire in decline, but I'm not exactly certain.
Yeah, because this whole it's this Manichaean sense of, like, there are these two opposing forces that are, like,
Or is it a Hegelian sense?
is it? I mean, they kind of go together in a way. I mean, the dialect.
Yeah. Yes.
So then what's it gonna take to, like, is there gonna be some uprising at some point? Like, does one force have to defeat the other? Because, like, I mean, first of all, if we don't believe that Hegel was right, or if we're not Manichaeans, then, like, it doesn't have to be this way. There can be
It
some.
does though. I mean, I'm a
Why?
Hegelian. I think it
Okay,
has
so
to be so.
tell me, why does it, what's it gonna have to, how's it gonna have to play out then if we're Hegelians?
I see two options now. There will be um, either intense unification under basically the banner of neoliberalism and monoculture, and we will try to colonize the world, and we will fail miserably.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the outcomes, or the other outcome is such deep-rooted divisions that there will be some kind of civil war, even if it's not given that name. And we'll see kind of a Brazilification of our politics, where it kind of takes on more of a street fight kind of character.
Okay. Why are you a Hegelian though?
Because I think he's right.
Why?
I think, I like to say that in some sort of Platonist sense, that I was born a Hegelian and I'll die a Hegelian, and there's nothing I can do about it. So if born this way scratches the itch, if you want a fuller answer, I can give you one. But
Yeah, so I guess Gaga was right. We're born one way or another. I don't
yeah,
know, because
we're
I
one
can't,
way or another dialectically.
yes, dialectically. I don't know. I can't, I think, yeah, it's plausible to construe history, existence this way, but like I feel like I have too much evidence to indicate that some kind of reconciliation is possible. Maybe not for
There
everyone.
is reconciliation. It just happens to occur through opposition. That's what you're taking issue with.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. I don't know if the opposition, like, I do think there's an alternative, but I do think we have a choice. Like, I think some people are just going to approach it through this opposition, but I do think there's like a possibility of something else.
And you believe in free will. Christ, you're in bad shape.
I know. Terrible. Free will is, I mean, it's terrifying. But do we not? You say we don't have free will.
Hmm?
You say we don't have free will
Yeah, I do.
because.
Because I take a determinist position that all of our choices are kind of pre-combinated. That everything we do is predetermined in some sense, if not by us or by the powers that be, then by God.
Okay. Because I could get with the idea that, like, okay, there's a kind of societal determinism that, like, our choices are set for us by the powers that be. Right now, there would be major corporations, government, social media. But on a more fundamental level, like, I could be liberated from that. I can achieve some kind of enlightenment and see through it.
I think liberation from those powers are still entirely possible.
Hmm.
And that if liberation from those powers were to happen, that it would have already been, constructed. Even that would be predetermined. But that,
Oh, okay.
so there is a possibility to be liberated from those forces, absolutely. And that's something that I would not only support, but, give my life towards. It just so happens that I also think that my proclivity to give my life towards that cause is something that was written into my bones before my birth.
So then, if we're talking on the level of like God or the ultimate, um,
The world geist.
the world, guys, is is there a difference between like having a destiny that's written for me, that like I have the free will to choose to assent to or reject, versus like everything that I choose is already written?
Well,
Like fate.
I believe that yeah, your idea of wanting to reject or assent to destiny is something that was predestined. Even your proclivity to want that is something that's predestined.
So hell is predestined for some people.
I'm not a Calvinist.
Okay.
I believe that hell kind of behaves in an interesting way as a test. I don't believe that it's like a test of your actions on Earth,
Mhm.
but I think it's a show of your deviation from your faith that you get sent to hell.
Okay. Interesting.
So basically, if you don't trust the plan enough, you get sent to the underworld.
Okay. So that capacity to
So,
trust, that
so you
pre-determined?
could, you could mark that as dissent, and I suppose you could like make that choice
Okay.
to go to hell. That if that's your proclivity, but I don't think that you per se would be the only person that sends you to hell.
Okay.
A
So
lot of
there,
people would be coming with you based on
yeah.
social media, big corporations, down the line.
Okay. So if we bring,
Because you can't freely make the decision to dissent from God's will, and the vast majority of people that do are aided by lots of evil and wicked powers, human and non.
so if there is a God and God is merciful, then we're not totally screwed.
No, and
We're
I believe
totally,
God is merciful. Yes.
okay. So then we're okay. It's not totally.
No, I'm not a doomer at all.
Okay.
Despite the
That's
beanie,
comforting.
I'm not a doomer.
That's comforting. So if we bring this back to universities before we wrap up, if this is the state of things in the world today, then how can one make the most out of the university experience? What would you say?
I would say that you need to be living good. I think that a lot of people in college put a very high emphasis on doing things that they would have previously been disallowed for doing, and then finding out that there was a reason they were disallowed from doing it in the first place and learning the hard way. And if that's how you have to go about things, I understand. I'm sympathetic to it. But I think that to get the most out of the college experience, what you want to do is you want to like get some fresh air, walk into a lecture that's not yours, like learn something that's
Mm,
outside of your field of study, talk to strangers. Like you really, there's a lot. When you put upwards of 25,000 people who are your age and are among the smartest in your state in one place to eat, learn, think, and like behave together, cohabitate, to not take advantage of that and to sit in your room is sickening to me. I couldn't do it.
mm. So give an
Some
example.
people can, but it's not my cup of tea.
So what's something you have done that give an example of something you've done to like kind of break that trend?
Well, I kind of have a natural proclivity for talking to strangers. So every time I'm on the elevator, I'm like, "Hey, what's going on with you today?" And they're like, "Oh my God, this kid's fucking weird,"
Yeah.
right? But it really does break this parasociality. Like they may just want to watch TikToks on their phone, but I don't actually care about what they desire because I know what's good for them.
Interesting. I wonder what would happen if someone did that in New York. That's
Yeah, it's a little bit different out here.
yeah. I don't now I want to try it though. Now I want to see what's gonna happen. Hopefully I won't get hurt in the process, but
See, you also have to have kind of a will to power about it. Like
which
if someone tries to hurt you, you have to be prepared to hurt back.
oh God, we're getting Nietzschean now. All
Oh
right.
yeah.
I knew it would go there. Okay. So there might be some hope in the end, especially if you go outside of the box, break the script, um, and actually look for something more
Yeah,
than
and don't just talk to like, people you want to be friends with, people you think are cool,
yeah.
whatever. Because like this is something very important that people need to know is that like you should be talking to everybody. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. You need to be talking to the trees, you need to be talking to yourself, you need to be talking to,
The
we have like a we
anti-vaxxers,
yeah, we have
everyone.
someone who's kind of called like the campus crazy lady, right?
Mhm.
Because she'll stand up and preach about like how Obama was a lesbian and all these things.
Okay. Well,
You have
probably
to talk
true.
to her. You have to like you really have to check all of the boxes. You have to really kind of put yourself in danger, and that danger will be an animating force for the rest of your day. It's better than any cup of coffee on the market.
Yeah, and less expensive. So there we have it. There is hope. But yeah, you got to take risks, as always.
Yeah, don't wear your seatbelt.
No, please don't,
Turn the airbags off, live life.
unless you're in a real car. Um,
No, even when you're in a real
even
car,
then, fine. All right.
don't wear a condom, grow up, face
Well,
the consequences of your actions.
natural law. Well, so
Divine command theory.
divine command theory. There we go. So I'm going to thank Joseph for joining Cracks and Pomo, and I hope that you've been sufficiently scandalized. Goodbye.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.